Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is global giants. ICAT moves the world's largest cargo with my friend Cser. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me on today.
I'm always happy to talk to you. Chris, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Sure. My name is Cser, Director of Operations at ICAT Logistics. We're based on the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, right outside of Metro Airport. And ICAT has been around since 1992 in our headquarters of Baltimore. And we've expanded across the United States as well as to Europe in the 30 plus years of existence.
Very nice. So I should spell everything for everyone here. So ICAT is ICAT. I always just call it ICAT. It's always all capitalized. Does ICAT stand for anything?
It does. Intercontinental Air Transportation is how it started. Way back when Rick started, he saw a logo and came up with the acronym. And he says, one day I am going to own a company with that name on it.
Very nice. So also your name, Cser, Cser, for anyone looking you up.
Very unusual. Google doesn't even know how to pronounce it correctly.
Exactly.
So I'm sure a few acronyms or a few letters were chopped off as Ellis Island when the family came across.
Right. And we were just talking before we hit record, and I called you Dan, which is your brother's name, because normally I talk to Dan over at ICAT. I just had lunch with him, I don't know, a month and a half ago, and I said, one of you guys has to come on the podcast. And since you were customers that day, he says, Chris will.
Yep, I am here for that.
So what do you guys specialize in?
We specialize in global transportation. That is typically unusual. It could be the size, it could be the weights, could be the dimensions, it could be a high value product, could be a high consequence product where there would be far more consequences if the freight didn't deliver or delivered late.
So you guys do a lot of freight forwarding. I know that. I know you guys also have some warehousing, and you have some trucks, and you do the brokers. So you guys do it all. But today's topic is all about cargo logistics or cargo freight, whatever you want to call it. It's the harder stuff that's coming from overseas that is big, bulky, difficult, high value. We'll get into more of the details. And there's a lot of companies out there who do freight forwarding. Obviously, we see containerized freight all the time. That's very normal. It's also relatively easy compared to the stuff you guys get into. I know you do containerized freight too, but there's the stuff you guys move. A lot of other companies say, no, thanks. We don't do that.
No, thank you. That's our little niche in the market. So you nailed it, Joe. If it doesn't fit in a container, how does it move? That's where we come in. That's where our experience and resources play a vital part in moving something that's large.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about you, Chris. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined ICAT Logistics.
Sure. It almost sounds like a Jason Bourne movie. So I went to high school in Bishop Borges High School in the late 80s and didn't really know what I wanted to do after high school. So did some odd jobs. And then I was looking at the Coast Guard. So that takes us to 1990. And Dan, my brother, as you said, was going on his own, starting his own freight forwarding company. And he called me up and asked me what I was going to do. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to join the Coast Guard. He says, how about logistics? And I'm like, well, how about what? What is this logistics you speak of? And then he said, give me 6 months. If it doesn't work out, you can join the Coast Guard. So 32 plus years and 6 months later, it's in my blood and it just won't leave. It's been a passion.
You guys have built something great. I'm always impressed whenever I go visit. You guys are probably an hour from me. And last time I visited, it was more and more. And I know it's the stuff that you guys work on is, we were talking before we hit record. I referred my old neighbor to you, was calling me all the time and saying, Joe, I can't get this stuff moved. It's in France and nobody wants to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I go, I know somebody will fix it. A day later, he called me back. He goes, those guys specialize in that. I was like, I think it was some sort of robot thing and no one wanted anything to do with it. So anyway, let's get to the topic today, which is this project cargo or project freight. It is different. And when we call it project cargo or project freight, it's because it really is a project. It's not just Oh yeah, tell us the dimension, the weight. We'll get you a container and put it in there, and we're all set. And it's also not, hey, it's a whole bunch of cars and we move them every single day. This is often stuff that is much more difficult to move. So please give me your 2 cents on what is that project cargo. Define it and give us some examples of it.
Sure. So project cargo, so many have tried to define it and redefine it, but project cargo is high value or high consequences. Again, if it doesn't deliver, think of a trade show overseas. Someone puts a big booth together. And we've seen big booths at the Detroit Auto Show. So think of some of the German and the Japanese and Chinese car makers bringing in these huge displays that you can walk around that are interactive. If it ships and doesn't get there and you go to the Detroit Auto Show and you see a blank space, that's a big no for everybody. Bad marketing, bad press. I'm sure heads are going to roll at those companies. So that is what we call high consequence. High value product could be a $10 million printing press or a $10 million stamping press or something as simple as a computer server with all the servers in the racks that has $1 million plus requirement of data. You don't want a data leak. That is huge right now. So imagine if a server goes missing and all that information is now somewhere and someone took it that doesn't have the clearance to look at, or your data gets sold. Those are a couple of examples of what we're doing on the project side.
Yep. And the consequences, I know you guys are moving stuff for the military, which oftentimes is life and death because it's moving to a war zone and somebody needs that equipment. But a lot of times it's humanitarian stuff. So if you say, oh yeah, we're moving stuff to help save lives in Europe or in the Middle East, and then all of a sudden somebody says, oh yeah, that those people who suffered so much, just give it another week while we look for the stuff.
No, it's not an option. It's like the old saying, failure is not an option. So you have to create a plan and a timeline that works, execute, and deliver.
Yep. So I had written some notes down before we hit record. Some of the stuff you guys are moving, and you mentioned the trade shows, the machinery moving, the stuff that moved to China 30 years ago. You guys moved a lot of that stuff, and now you're moving a lot of stuff back from China. You're moving stuff from China to Mexico, and those could be entire assembly lines, correct?
Multiple break bulk pieces that don't fit in containers. And if you have one large machine that doesn't fit in the container, it might have 10, 20 containers worth of assembly parts to put the machine together with the cables and the fixtures and such. So it is definitely a large project, large scale, multiple months.
And I know you guys will also, again, it really is a project management involved here where you'll say, yeah, we will get the people to break it down, box it, label it, get it loaded, get it to the port, clear customs, get it all the way over here, and then get it to, whether it's going to Mexico or Texas or Indiana, you will get it there so it can be reassembled. And when you think about the assembly line, production facilities, all the things we just talked about, you can't miss one bolt, one screw. Nothing can be off. You can't say, oh yeah, we got most of the boxes. Most of the boxes doesn't open the plant.
No, not at all. And if it's not delivered in a certain order, then that just causes confusion.
Yeah, it's got to be sequenced.
Yeah, 100% sequenced. So we work with that. We work with the shipper. We work with the installers. We work with the clients, their suppliers. So we are the point of contact. So we are the laser focused.
You're the project manager's
center point for all that on that.
Yep. And I know also, I know there's specialized carriers. Not everyone will move the kind of stuff you're talking about. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah, so there's certain carriers like U.S. military goods going overseas to a U.S. military base. It can only operate on U.S. flag vessels. So we're not going to put U.S. military goods on a Chinese-owned vessel or a foreign-owned vessel that might considerably not be friendly right now. The government has requirements that it only moves on certain carriers, and these carriers can handle the extremely the large, or there's two ways of looking at it: the big and ugly, or the big, bold, and beautiful. So beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So it depends what it is. And we have the relationships with these certain carriers that will move out of gauge cargo. That requires certain cranes and large cranes, heavy pieces, like something that can be picked up that's 2 million pounds. So if you pick a 2 million pound piece up, it's probably going to have about a 4 million pound press to counterweight the balance to lift it over the side of a vessel or get it through the entry point. So
I know you guys have some sort of special clearances too. Please elaborate on that. The reason I say that is because every time I come to visit you guys, I can't get in the building unless I call.
Yeah, so we are regulated with the government and TSA and CTPAT and certain government lettered agencies want you to have security clearances. So we do have that. And when you go on ports, you have to have passes as well and background checks. So no, we're the little spy guys that really won't get us into any big government agencies, but we have minimum clearances that will have access that the general public cannot have.
Yeah, it's again, if you're moving stuff for the military, as you said, it's different carriers, but also you guys you're held to a higher standard. And by the way, I should also say, I know you guys will also move somebody's less than truckload or truckload, and I know you guys have some trucks of your own even. So you are very capable of doing the over the road. We're talking about this stuff because it is above and beyond. And I always say, if you can manage this kind of freight, your 2 truckloads to California shouldn't be a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. You have the trust in putting your $1 million and your company's reputation on the line. So if you can execute that flawlessly, then the other stuff's, it's called gravy. We can move the general truckloads and the smaller, it's super not important, just get there damage free. So yeah, we can help with the little domestic stuff and general exports, imports.
So I know also we're in Michigan, a lot of automotive stuff here. I've moved stuff in the past. I remember trying to move, what was it, airbags into Thailand, and their explosives go inside of airbags. And I remember just, even when you call ahead and tell them, hey, this is what it is, don't worry, these aren't bombs, it's not easy to get that stuff through. So there's a lot of hazardous or explosive stuff that moves. That is also a higher bar. Please elaborate on that.
Yeah. So the government put in hazmat or dangerous good regulation. So it's funny, you said an airbag. It's not a bomb. But if you really break it down, it is a bomb. It goes off on impact. It has severe consequences to it. We're an extra level of compliance for most manufacturers or distribution centers that, a lot of people want to extend outside of our border. So let's start shipping internationally. Never shipped internationally. Just because something may not be regulated on the ground, LTL, which is the simplest form. When you're going on a plane and there's passengers on that plane, everybody on the passenger side above the cargo holds definitely want to feel safe and secure. We have to look at those things, even batteries, like your laptop battery.
Not only like here in the automotive city, Detroit, here in the Motor City, I should say, we have a lot of new electronic or electric batteries, and they're big, and somebody has to figure out how to move those, and they are hazmat, right?
Oh, 100%. Lithium batteries is definitely one of the hot topics in air freight as well as ocean right now. And one of the main reasons why the lithium battery is such a tongue-in-cheek hot subject right now is they burn so hot. Fire suppression is a real concern. That traditional fire suppression systems, and even if you look at it, even on a domestic level, fire departments are having to figure out ways. How do you put a 4,000-pound battery? How do you extinguish that? So now you're looking at different chemicals and different procedures and different regulations. So yeah, they definitely have to come into place, and the regulations are changing quickly. As soon as something unfortunately happens, new regulations will come in to prevent that. You don't want anything going, especially in the air. If a cargo aircraft, some of these cargo planes are flying, it's 1 million pounds up there. So you have 1 million pound bird in the air. Knock on wood, we don't want to see that land on any domestic or foreign soil where there could be casualties. So safety is definitely job one.
Yeah, and a lot of the mobile phones, from what I understand, that they all travel by air, not by ocean. And a lot of that stuff could be in the hulls of planes, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Planes, because that's a big part of the air freight is in passengers.
Yeah, so almost every plane that you fly on has cargo in the belly. And the cargo could be general cargo, like printed matter, or just regular auto parts, luggage. So when you're looking out the window luggage, you're probably seeing cargo being loaded. And sometimes commodities you just don't want to know that's on that plane, but they can fly if properly.
But usually that's going to be smaller and higher value. Plane, phones, drugs. I know I air freighted auto parts to China one time. It's cost a small fortune, but that was because we didn't want to miss production. That was a big explanation required afterwards because normally that stuff ships by ocean. It takes longer though. But managing that hazardous, again, there's a lot of companies that'll just say, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to talk to you at all. By the way, I've done 600 interviews.
Great.
That's not the point. The point is, I don't talk to anybody yet who moves stuff like this. It's just very rare. And most people, when they say, yeah, I move stuff from Asia or Europe to the US or vice versa, it's containerized freight. It's relatively easy. But when you talk about some of the other types of freight where it says, hey, we built a crane or a server and it was built in Asia and has to move to the US, it doesn't go in a container and it is wildly expensive and you have to find the right players to move it. It's a separate list.
Yeah, and multiple lists at that. There's the shipping list, there's the compliance list with US Customs, there could be Department of State requirements or Department of Commerce. So it's not just customs, and Amazon did a great job of hit a button and it ships. If it's high value or high consequences, or like you said, it might be hazardous or have some hazardous related materials. You mentioned server racks. Server racks do have batteries in it. And then if it's one little battery, it's okay. But if you add up the batteries, and then now you're looking at a different regulation. So we're an extra line. So there's shipping, there's customs, and a big one now for both importers and exporters is the compliance factor, because nobody wants federal officers at their door want to do inspection to see if you legally brought something in.
Yeah, I can say this. I've been a customer of this. Getting stuff to another country sometimes is really difficult because it doesn't clear customs easily, especially as an automotive where I worked. It was like you would think that as much automotive stuff that moves around the world that it would be pretty easy, but it isn't. Because what they're also worried about these days is, especially crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, is there contraband like drugs? Is this a front for something? And sometimes it's not a front for something, but some scoundrels snuck in and put drugs in your cargo. So that gets inspected for a good reason.
It does. It does. I mean, it happens. If you look at the federal bureaus are huge in the amount that they do to protect our soil and our borders. It could be, and it's, you mentioned drugs, but think about bugs. There's packaging regulations, and we have to use certain treated wood to make sure that there's no infestation, because last thing we want to do is introduce a species that will destroy the ecosystems.
Yeah, I have a buddy who used to work at customs in Detroit, and he's a lawyer now. And I remember when I mentioned, I go, every time I get off a plane from international, they get those drug sniffing dogs. He goes, this is probably not a drug sniffing dog. I go, what is it? He goes, it's a food sniffing dog.
USDA, yep, U.S. Agriculture.
He said, there's a lot of food that we don't want coming in this country. And he goes, and a lot of people say, hey, I'm afraid I'll get over there and they won't have this fill in the blank type of food. So I'm going to bring it with me. See,
right.
He used to say people would bribe him with food, and you're like, no, thanks. You can't bring this.
I've seen it. I've had those tours too. And I love Detroit. The dogs are called, they're beagles. So it's the U.S. Beagle Brigade. Right. And they have incredible noses. And some of these, Joe, we'll see a suitcase come in on some of the tours. We'll see the suitcase. Customs will open it up, and it's just wretched. It is literally fish that they wrapped in newspaper and put in the clothes. It's not vacuum sealed.
So you took some of that home for the family? Is that what
Oh, no, go straight to the compound or the incinerators. But you would think, why would you put a fish? And I'm not talking a fish this big. We're talking like, think about a 20-pound salmon or something in somebody's suitcase.
They're afraid we wouldn't have fish over here.
No, exactly. But it's just amazing. People do things. And that's why there's these lines of defense to help make sure that doesn't happen.
Yep. Chris, I know offshoring and nearshoring has been a big deal. For years, I know you guys moved being again an automotive area, moved a lot of stuff to Mexico, a lot of stuff to Asia that would be assembly lines that moved overseas. And now, are you seeing the opposite trend? Is it coming back?
We're seeing a lot more go country to country. As you mentioned, 30 years ago was the big move to China and Taiwan and the Pacific Rim. So now we're seeing a lot of it come to out of China to Mexico, some of it to Europe. And Vietnam is huge right now. Vietnam is the next big gateway. So everything that was China is China to Vietnam now. So we are seeing a lot of offshoring. Some of the smaller, more precision stuff is coming back to the United States. But from a consumer standpoint, everybody wants it cheaper.
Yep. To some extent, some of that technology and some of that work moved overseas, and we don't necessarily have the know-how to do certain things that got moved overseas at this point. I'm sure we could figure it out, but price is still a problem or a challenge. So are you guys capable of moving something from, say, China to Vietnam? Is that a project you would work on?
Yes, we do have those projects. We got partners that are specialized in handling like we do. And most of these big projects, one of the things that separates us from some of our competitors, it's boots on the ground. Our team, 7 million air miles flown in 142 countries that we've stepped foot in. So if you really want to know something, you got to do it. When they say you do something enough, look at 1 million miles. 1 million miles, you can be considered an expert. We've got over 7 million. So we've crossed the globe, stepped foot, checked down the regulations, worked with the parties over there, and could be airlines, it could be ocean carriers, ocean ports, ocean handlers. So when projects go that, you want someone that can go there, ate the local food, broke bread with the local people, and understand that, hey, these guys are great. Compared to some of our competitors that say they're international specialists, no passport, never left
Right.
Southeast Michigan.
My buddy Tim, he's got a automotive business, and I remember him saying, "Hey, can you help me? Who should I work with?" I said, "You should work with ICAT." And then he called me later on and said, "Joe," he goes, "the new supplier we have in China," he goes, "I've never been there." And he goes, "They said, 'Oh, you've never been there. We'll go over and make sure it's an actual factory and make sure there's actually something coming from there.'" And he goes, "They did that." He goes, "It saved me a fortune. I wasn't going to fly over there just to check out new auto parts." And that's worthwhile. So when you're moving something from China to Vietnam, you have people in both places?
Yes, we have China. Again, if they're a friendly country, we have partners there. And if it's a not so friendly country with our military and our government work, we got people there too. So if we are legally able to ship there, we have a partner there.
And that is increasingly important. We talked before we hit record about the challenges in the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. I think that's 12% of world trade is going through there. Now they're going around Africa to avoid the Red Sea and the Suez Canal that with the Houthi rebels. And then we have the challenge down in Panama which is 5% of global trade going through that canal. Now you guys say a lot of your freight is moving around South America.
Yeah, commerce doesn't stop. People want their products. You want your commodities on your store and your shelves and your grocery stores and your home improvement, and then automotive and manufacturing in the United States. Cars need to be built, refrigerators need to be built. So all these parts that are outsourced still need to make the final assembly in the United States.
And you also need a partner who can pick it up at any port and move it to every port. This is the nature of it. Nobody planned that one day the Panama Canal would be in a drought for God knows how long, or that Houthi rebels using just drones would be able to take down most of the traffic going through the Suez Canal. And who knows what the next one is, but we know there's going to be a next one. So you need to have somebody who says, I give you the flexibility to work however you need to. I think we used to just say, okay, that's coming from China. It goes to LA, goes to Long Beach. No other option. No one ever talked about, oh, what if that's not good? What if I want to move it through the canal, Panama Canal, and unload it in Houston or New York or wherever? We never looked at those as options. We never talked about I guess we did, a little bit about air freight, a lot of stuff that's not really conducive to that. But we need options now because the bar is super high for our customers, and the world is a dangerous place.
It is, and it will be. And I think you nailed it right on the head. That's one of our strengths is we give options. Our clientele are ones that says we need help, just like your neighbor did. We need help, and that's our perfect fit or our perfect client, or that we'll be able to give them options. So here's option A, option B, option C, and we can run through it and tell you the pros and the negatives on others. Some clients just say, hey, this is what I want. Don't deviate. I know what I'm doing. This is what we're going to do. Okay, great. We're probably not going to be a good fit for that. And good luck with the thousands of carriers that do that. And then, lo and behold, some of these come back. Can you get me out of this jam? Well, that's interesting. What happened? We shipped it, if we look at COVID, we shipped it to the West Coast and there's a rail shortage. There's a container shortage. The ports are backed up, that it's going to be 2-3 months and everything that could happen. Or recently in Baltimore, we got stuff stuck in Baltimore. It was the cheapest option. So now we got to work contingency plans for that.
Right. When we're talking about, and I know you guys do a ton of freight domestically here in your own trucks and other people's trucks. And when we're talking about something that's moving from, say, Indiana to Michigan, 5 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, and you're in the same country, so there's no customs. You speak the same language, use the same currency. You're more or less in the same time zone. And so there's a shipper, there's a receiver, trucking company, maybe a broker. That's relatively easy. Now you move that freight to the other side of the world and say, okay, that is in some town in China that you've never heard of. It probably has 10 million people. And now it has to move from that town to the port, has to clear customs, has to go. And I think there's 13 or 14 people involved in that. Different currencies, different customs, clearance, different cultures. All of that stuff has to be taken into account. It's just the bar is really high. But again, that's just regularized containerized cargo. When you talk about project cargo, it goes from 13, I suspect, to 30 very easily. You have to have those relationships in advance or it doesn't happen.
100%. That's a great example. Detroit to Indiana. We just get on a highway and we take 94 down to whatever, we're going to 69 into Indiana, we're good to go. But even if you look at China, there's different provinces that have different rules and regulations. So if you're shipping from Shanghai down to Shenzhen, different province, they have different rules on the road and responsibilities to that local province government that you have to make sure that's allowed. Or does that driver have permission or his license to go through that? So even in Europe now, once they got rid of the Euro divide, where Great Britain London pulls apart, it used to be like the United States in Europe, where you can just drive. But now you might have to do export clearance in Great Britain to go into Ireland. And it was a simple border crossing. But now our European partner said what was easily electronic transmission. Once that broke, you're talking 10 pages worth of product just to clear something that might have been €1,000.
Another issue that is increasingly important is knowing who you're selling to and also who you're working with. In automotive, we have the tier one suppliers. Those tier one suppliers are household names, usually Magna, TRW, Denso. These are huge companies. Some are larger than the automotive companies they serve. They have tier twos, and a lot of those are billion-dollar companies. We all recognize them. And then there's tier threes and tier fours, and those are usually more commodity. If you're the tier one, you know who they are probably. The OEM, the Stellantis, the Ford, the General Motors, Nissan, Toyota, whoever, BMW, they are increasingly expected to know who those tier fours are and tier threes, and making sure that there's not one thing that potentially gets into the wrong hands. So we mentioned how airbags could be used as a bomb, but also no slave labor, no working with certain countries. And that is really difficult. I was with a friend in Mexico when she was checking her emails. We were down in San Luis Potosi, and she said, the State Department's kind of on us because we have people who are trying to buy, it was machinery. They could be used for the wrong purposes. And she said, we have to figure out what's wrong with these guys. Why are they going from that was global company, going from country to country trying to buy this from us. And each one of our locations is saying, no, because you don't, you're on the list, right? And all they have to do is get by one time. So they have a global company has to make sure I don't sell to the wrong people, but also I can't buy from the wrong people. And you guys are right in the middle of that.
Yeah. So I think it's like the old saying, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And that's where we're real high in compliance. We're in every possible customs voluntary or involuntary program to make sure that if the supplier says they're in somewhere in the pack rim, that we know the product's not being shipped in from another one, just with due diligence and our partners' relationships that belong to these like CTPAT programs, that we know where it's coming from. So it doesn't say, hey, meet me on the back street corner and take this truckload of freight, like a bad B movie that we watch on television, and then somehow it gets passed along and relabeled. Yeah, we are in these programs that we have the due diligence and our partners over there that understand that the consequences are much greater than the potential one-time windfall that some companies might look for and try to increase profits by doing things that's shady.
Yeah. And again, if not only does the government want to make sure you're not using slave labor, obviously that's a good thing, but imagine the press that you get. The world is very transparent now, where all of a sudden it's like, hey, this very well respected company is using child labor or using slave labor or unsafe facilities. It doesn't work anymore. And I used to say we used to just have PR over the top of it, but we also didn't have the news of what was going on overseas.
No, not like today. So yeah, that's the worst thing. Nobody wants to be on the 6 o'clock news.
Exactly. So, Chris, I'm going to summarize some of this, then I want to get your final thoughts on the topic. So I'm talking to my friend Chris Cser, and we're talking about global giants. ICAT moves the world's largest cargo, not just the largest, but also, I will say, some of the more important cargo. So Project Cargo is just that. It is a project. It means you have to be a project manager. You're not just, can't all be automated. You can't say, hey, just enter that into our system and everything will be fine. This is, again, higher value, higher consequence, very often life and death. It could be the international trade show, the stuff that you spent $1 million building that booth and all the fancy stuff that went with it. It can't get there a week late. Right? Could be machinery that has to be broken down and moved from one country to another, and you've never been to either country. High tech stuff or electronics, servers that could have tons of data on it, or a brand new server that if it's dropped, that you just lost $1 million. Could be military stuff or humanitarian aid, tanks, tractors, anything that is, again, higher value, higher consequence, higher risk. This it's high touch also. So you need obviously specialized knowledge. You guys have to be the project manager. You have to know the specialized carriers that you can work with. You have to know all the rules of all the countries, and you have to have people on the ground in those locations. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. This is one of those things where you do not want your logistics company to learn on your dime.
No, we don't want guinea pigs.
Yes. And every once in a while, someone will say, like heavy haul stuff, they'll go, these other guys, and I always say, I worry about the low price. When somebody says, these guys are like $10,000 cheaper, my first thought is, do they know what they're doing? I know I don't, but do they know what they're doing? Because maybe they're missing a license or a follow-up car. I don't know what they're missing, but they're missing something. Right? Or why are they cheaper? Are they trying that hard to win business? I'm afraid of that.
Yeah, you should be.
When I'm looking on over the road, and I don't think it's necessarily the best way to look, but if I say, oh, these guys are $30 cheaper, I don't think they're incompetent. On this stuff, if somebody's like, Why are these guys so cheap? It could be a problem. So it's the size, the weight, it's big, it's bulky, it's hazardous. This is the stuff that is really hard. And again, you have to have the specialized knowledge, boots on the ground worldwide. If they have the experience, you have to have the clearances, the ability to do this work, and not everybody does. In fact, again, I've done 600 interviews. I don't think I've talked to anyone who does this in the way you guys do it. Final thoughts on the topic, Chris Cser.
Yeah. I think I got to put you on the payroll because you just described us perfectly. So, Joe, we appreciate that and your knowledge. And again, when you have these projects, how is it packaged? Is it packaged correctly? You just can't go to a lumber store or a Lowe's or a Home Depot and buy wood. That's not the stuff that can go across the world. So, again, as you said, you spend $1 million of manufacturing this, and then you had a guy in the shop build a crate for $500. That $500 could cost you $1 million because they don't always, other countries and even the United States, they don't tread lightly on that. If your packaging is wrong, they might confiscate that and you will never see it again, or they'll destroy it. So just think about that $1 million server going into a big grinder and just becoming recyclable metals and such. So we have the team that can look at the packaging, make sure it's going to withstand a 2G pull when it takes off in a cargo aircraft going into the air, or to be able to make a journey across the seas and the oceans that are saltwater and look out for oxidization and moisture barriers. So those are things that goes beyond the shipping and the consulting realm that we can assist in.
Yep. Again, it's Project Cargo. It's called Project Cargo because it literally is a project, and it's not something that moves in, hey, move this next week. If somebody calls you this week, it ain't moving next week unless there's
right. Unless everything lined up perfectly.
Yeah. This is stuff where you can say, this, you said it earlier, no guinea pigs.
No guinea pig.
There is a lot of this stuff right now where we're reconsidering where this stuff is going to be built. Might be moving back from China. From what I understand, China is not always easy to move stuff out of right now. So even if you want to move it, you might not move it. But anyway, what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from ICAT at?
If you are in Panama in October, I will be at the SCN Security Cargo Network Conference. That's the global network that we belong to with freight forwarders from around the world that we meet with once or twice a year. So we'll be in Panama in October. We are doing an event in August up at the National Guard base in Grayling for vendors and potential vendors of the National Guard and the government. So we'll be up there.
Grayling's in northern Michigan, by the way, sir.
Yes. The largest National Guard base in the United States. A little Michigan trivia there, if no one knew that.
Normally you think of Grayling, you think that's where my buddy's cottage is at. Then we're going fishing or hunting.
No, but yeah, it's a huge, like I said, the largest in the United States. We'll be there. And then we are the designated preferred logistics carrier for Angus, which is a National Guard show coming to Huntington Center next month in August.
Where's Huntington Center?
The old Cobo Hall. So downtown Detroit, Huntington Center.
Ah, very nice. Very nice. I didn't know that. So, Chris, what I'll do is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile. I'll put a link to your website. And any other link. I know you guys have some white papers, and I think you also have been on a few other podcasts recently. Anything you and your marketing team give me, I'll put those in the show notes so people can reach out and talk to you.
Sounds great, Joe.
Chris, it was great talking to you. Finally, we've been trying to set this up, I think, for a year.
We were. It's logistics. This is high value, high content right here. That's why it's
hard to get you guys to get on the podcast, but I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it. Thank you so much.
Too. Thank you much.
And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.